300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on JJ Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malcolm with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad you could join me on a Monday morning. This is a jam-packed morning. I have a great show for you today. A lot to discuss, not only from the NBA All-Star Game, but even from Juwan Howard striking a Wisconsin assistant coach. I'm going to touch on that, and even more news out of the NFL down the road, along with a great segment of Malkin's Moments. But I have to start in the NBA, and not with yesterday's All-Star festivities, which I'm going to get to, but kind of major news that flew under the radar right before the All-Star weekend. Phoenix Suns point guard, their star point guard, Chris Paul, who was actually just announced as a top 75 player of all time, who was recognized yesterday. He is now out 6 to 8 weeks due to a thumb fracture that he sustained on Wednesday of last week against the Houston Rockets in a game. And this is some major news. Now, this is very significant, not just because of the fact that we're unsure whether Chris Paul is going to return the rest of the season. Obviously, he's going to return. That's not the concern. The concern is about the seeding, and especially for a Phoenix Suns team trying to hold on to the number 1 seed and retain the top spot in the Western Conference, because right now they have the best record in the NBA, 48-10. They are 6.5 games clear of the next closest, which is the Golden State Warriors. So right now, yes, they have a sizable cushion, but you're talking about perhaps at the earliest, if this timetable is accurate, Chris Paul comes back the last week of the regular season, best case scenario, or first round of the postseason. So this is a really significant injury being sustained to Chris Paul. The other thing is, as great as the Phoenix Suns have been on the road over the last 2 years, they had the best record on the road last season. They have the best road record this year in the NBA, and as proven as they are to a degree, because this is a team, after all, that reached the NBA Finals last year. They were knocking on the door. They had nearly reached the precipice of winning an NBA title. So they are challenged. They are battle-tested. But I do think that because they are lacking a championship, it adds more urgency to hold on for home court advantage throughout the duration of the postseason. I think that for a team like that, where when you look at the Western Conference, you say the Phoenix Suns and the Golden State Warriors are probably the 2 best teams in the Western Conference, and there's a strong argument to be made they are the 2 best teams in the NBA, period, that ultimately the team that has home court advantage in a series like that I think would go the distance would prove to be the difference. And that's why this is substantial to me, is because I'm not concerned about Chris Paul, about his availability. He'll come back. No questions about that, no reservations about that, but where will they be in the standing? Will they be able to take a Warriors team 7 games and have that 7th game be played in Phoenix, or will they have to go to the Chase Center in San Francisco. So that's the concern for me. Now, surprisingly, this is the first significant injury that Chris Paul has sustained in a Phoenix Suns uniform. To his credit, he had played in every single game this year for the Phoenix Suns. He and Mikal Bridges were the only two guys that had played in all 58 games. But obviously, we know the litany of injuries that he has sustained throughout the course of his career, and all of them have been untimely injuries as well. Obviously, last year in the postseason with the hand, it wasn't significant, but it was enough to derail the team a little bit. The hamstrings, he has pulled so many, or he has strained his hamstring multiple postseasons over the course of his career. Obviously, infamously with the Houston Rockets when they were up 3-2 over that Golden State Warriors team with Steph, Clay, Draymond, KD, Andre Iguodala. There's a strong argument to be made that had Chris Paul not going down, they would have won that series. So most of the time they've been untimely, and this is the first significant injury that he has sustained. And again, given the timeline, it's just not the best as far as giving him ample time to get his conditioning back. Now, I guess at this stage in his career, he's a proven veteran. He'll understand how to pace himself, and now he'll get a little bit of rest before the postseason. But I also just thought that when I saw him play yesterday in the All-Star game, now granted, he didn't play many minutes, and the Phoenix Suns coach, Monty Williams, was the head coach of the All-Star game. So he's aware of Chris Paul's situation. Did I love that he checked into the game briefly? No, I didn't think it was a great look from an optics standpoint. Obviously, he wanted to pay tribute and pay his respects to the fans and media for voting him in the All-Star game, and who knows how many more All-Star games he's going to be voted into. So that certainly played a role into his decision. But if you're a Phoenix Suns fan and you know he's going to be out 6 to 8 weeks, do you love seeing him out on the floor? Not particularly. So I think, though, that this is a major blow for Phoenix Suns team. But now we'll really get a chance to see how much and how far Devin Booker has grown and has matured in his NBA career, because this is a golden opportunity for him to show not only the Phoenix Suns, but to prove to the NBA, hey, listen, I'm a different player. I'm a different leader for this Phoenix Suns team, because they're going to be leaning heavily on him during this stretch. He's been having a fantastic season, was an all-star and deservedly so. Strong argument could have been made for him to be an all-star starter this year, averaging 25 points per game. The guy's lethal. We know that. So this is a golden opportunity to see what he's capable of. Is this going to be the same Phoenix Suns team where he's averaging 25 points per game, but they are struggling to be a 500 caliber group? Or will the leadership skills have rubbed off from CP3 to Devin Booker, and we're going to see it kind of manifest and present itself right now? Cameron Payne, he'll be fine. Cameron Payne's been averaging 10.5 points per game in about 20 minutes per night in the NBA. He's proven that he can fill to a certain degree the void when Chris Paul isn't playing. We saw it in the postseason last year, but now this is an extended period of time. So this is a big void, though, collectively to fill. And obviously, Chris Paul's impact on a team is profound. It's astronomically high. I think we saw over the last 2 seasons, it became extremely apparent how valuable he is to the NBA, what he did for the Oklahoma City Thunder, and then what he did for the Phoenix Suns last year. Provides the ultimate leadership, ultimate intangibles. So he will be dearly missed. But the way that he's been the kind of conductor of this Phoenix Suns team, orchestrating the offense, holding guys accountable, showing the leadership, that's going to be missing. It's going to be lacking, but we'll see what the rest of the cast is made of. But this is a major, major injury that really, in a story that most people really weren't talking about, because it flew and kind of blended right into the All-Star game. And now that we are heading out of that, it's going to be a story to pay attention to. Another story to potentially pay attention to, more interesting little crumbs to follow a trail potentially with LeBron James. He always leaves question marks and uncertainties everywhere he goes. He builds up dramas and storylines, and he did it again when asked about a potential return to Cleveland. He said that he's not ruling it. He's not ruling it out. He's not saying he's coming back, but he's not saying he's going to rule it out. He doesn't know what his future holds. So would I be completely shocked? Let me first say this. Would I be completely shocked if LeBron James made a return to Cleveland? No. We know his history. He's from Spring Hill in Ohio, very close to Akron. He played the first 7 years of his career as a Cleveland Cavalier. He had 2 stints, returned back after he left for years 7 through 11, then came back for years 12 through 15, obviously won a title, and then dipped. So is it inconceivable to me that he would ever put on a Cleveland Cavaliers uniform again? The answer is no. I think that there is a part of him that will be forever attached and entrenched within that organization and attached to that franchise, just inherently because of who he is, what he's meant to the city, what he's meant to that organization. Not to mention, he hopes to be an owner of an NBA team someday, and the Cleveland Cavaliers seem like the likeliest option to do that. Now, does he have the greatest relationship with Dan Gilbert? No. But they've got a working relationship. They're cordial at this point with one another. It's almost similar to Michael Jordan during the last phase of his career, when he decided to play for the Washington Wizards in the hopes of being a part owner of the team. Now, obviously, that didn't pan out. He had to pivot, and he became an owner of the Charlotte, at the time, Bobcats, now the Charlotte Hornets. But it's kind of the same thing with LeBron. He wants to be an owner, and that's a viable spot. That's a viable team for him to potentially get his foot in the door. Now, as far as do I see LeBron fleeing the Lakers or just fleeing LA to join the Cavaliers because of their nascent growth and because of the talent that they have right now on the roster around Darius Garland and Jared Allen, who were just named All-Stars, who played in the All-Star game yesterday, and that core of those 2 guys and Evan Mobley and the crew? Do I see him fleeing LA because of the talent on the Cavaliers? No. I don't see that happening at this stage in his career. As much as LeBron respects younger, promising, talented players, he has shown a penchant for and a proclivity for desiring veterans and seasoned guys, proven guys, older guys in the NBA. So I don't see him leaving for those reasons. However, could I see him signing a 10-day contract to retire as a Cleveland Cavalier? Yes, I could see that happen. That isn't out of the question for me. The big thing is he's come out and publicly stated that he will go wherever his son is drafted. So I think that he'll stay in LA until Bronny becomes eligible for the NBA draft. And then at that point, wherever Bronny is drafted, that's where LeBron's going to go. And he's made that publicly. He stated that publicly. He's made that publicly clear and known that he wants to play one season with his son. That might be at the earliest 2024, potentially 2025, depending on Bronny's trajectory. So he's trying to align the end of his career, the final curtain of his career, and have it kind of dovetail with the beginning of Bronny's potential NBA career. So again, from a business standpoint, it doesn't really matter at this point for LeBron where he's operating out of. He can operate his businesses anywhere. There was a reason why he came to LA, not only to win a title with the Lakers, because he knows the brand. It's a huge brand. He knows that they would be able to lure potential free agents, but also because of the bevy of businesses that he has in LA and the opportunities that present themselves just being in this market. So I don't think he's trying to leave that right now. And if he is going to leave it to return to the Cleveland Cavaliers, it's not going to be because of the talent that they have on the roster. It would be to retire. It would be to make a last ditch play to potentially become an owner once he's done immediately playing, or wherever Bronny Jr. or Bronny ends up getting drafted. That seems to be the most likely of scenarios in this instance for me. But LeBron James also made some interesting comments, though, and this was overall a great piece from The Athletic. And not only was he talking about his son wanting to play with his son, he was also giving high praise to the Oklahoma City Thunder GM Sam Presti, calling him the MVP. Now, obviously, this report comes on the heels of a lot of information being leaked out of Clutch's camp and through a bunch of NBA sources that the relationship had kind of between the Lakers and Clutch Sports had kind of reached a boiling point, and they were really frustrated with Rob Pelinka because of his refusal to make a Russell Westbrook and John Wall trade. Now, obviously, in order to have completed that trade, the likelihood is that the Lakers would have needed to have included that 2027 first-round pick, which Rob Pelinka was reluctant to do. And for me, I would have been very indifferent about the trade. I was already indifferent about the trade going into it, even when they threw it out hypothetically. I wouldn't have loved it. I wouldn't have hated it. It's one of those things where you kind of just react to it, and your thoughts kind of develop your thoughts once you see it happen. So I definitely would acknowledge that a move needed to be made. There's no question around that. There's no dancing around that. So from the perspective of, should there have been disappointment in the LeBron camp that nothing was done? Yes. There's no question about that. The Lakers are 27-31. They're ninth in the Western Conference. They're a struggling team right now in the NBA. Nothing's going right. Anthony Davis now badly turned his ankle. He's out at least a month. It looked brutal. It looked awful. It was cringeworthy to see that ankle sprain. So the fact that it was not even worse than that is a blessing. But this is kind of the LeBron story, because everywhere he goes, it's a 4-year process. He ends up exhausting all of the resources that franchise has wherever he is. That franchise mortgages their future to cater to LeBron in the present. He wins them a title, and then he leaves, and he flees to go somewhere else. It's a 4-year process. Year one, he arrives midway through the season. He's trying to trade a bunch of the young pieces to acquire old vets. It doesn't mesh together perfectly in the first year, but they still reach the postseason. Year two, they win the title, which we've seen the last 3 locations he's been: Miami, Cleveland, Lakers. He always wins a title in year two. He has the perfect blend, the perfect harmony. The cohesiveness is there of his teammates. Year 3, we start to see some breakdowns. Some of the old veterans, they can't bring back everyone. They try to re-sign all of those key vets in the offseason. They reach the postseason, and they kind of flame out. And then by year 4, the team is depleted. They're normally plagued by injuries. LeBron has to carry the load by himself, and they come up a little bit short. And then he shrewdly decides to take his talents elsewhere and seek out a new location and a new destination. That's kind of the sequence of events with LeBron over the course of his career. So the downside is, by the time you reach the 4th year, the entire roster is depleted. You don't have any future capital to work with, no future draft picks. You have no current young players on the roster. So the future is a bit bleak. And you also don't have any trade assets to make moves to acquire other guys. So that's kind of the problem with the LeBron method. Now, it works, and teams are willing to do it, because if you are in an NBA, if you are in the midst of an NBA title drought, well, this is a way to answer that and to collect a title. Is you appeal to LeBron. You appeal to your superstar. So obviously this is a blatant criticism of Rob Pelinka. There's no sugarcoating that. Yes, it was quasi passive aggressive. This is pretty direct from LeBron and from Clutch Sports that they are frustrated with Rob Pelinka. And I think that there is a fine line between catering to your superstar and also making the best serving the best interests of the organization you're working for. Those are two very different things, and you have to delineate between the two. That's the reality. You have to decipher between the two. And it's interesting to me because as I was listening to these quotes and I was reading these quotes that LeBron said about he was complimenting Sam Presti for his GMing skills and specifically for his ability to identify talent and his draft acumen, how he drafted KD, how he drafted Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Reggie Jackson, Serge Ibaka, Josh Giddey, Jeff Green, but most recently Josh Giddey, who has proven to be a really standout player, an up-and-coming player in the NBA. The irony is the way that LeBron operates and the way that he wants his GMs to operate don't coexist. There isn't a natural marriage between the two. In fact, they are the antitheses of one another. Because for a GM to draft a player, you have to first of all have picks and you have to provide them opportunities to grow. LeBron doesn't provide safe havens for recent draft picks. He's trying to ship them out. He wants proven guys. So the LeBron method doesn't allow for GMs to showcase their drafting skills. Because once they draft a player, the player is gone. We've actually seen that the track record of the Lakers and their drafting skills is actually fairly good. It's actually quite high. D'Angelo Russell, Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, Julius Randle, Jordan Clarkson, now THT. Now, no one's saying that those guys are world beaters, that they're going to be a top 10 player of all time or a top 10 player in the NBA, but a lot of those guys have been all-stars. A lot of those guys have been vital contributors and quality NBA players, but they needed opportunities to flourish and grow, and the Lakers couldn't provide that primarily because of LeBron's arrival. Now, no one's mad about it because it led to a title, but that's the reality of the situation. And so I understand that LeBron is frustrated. And to be honest, Rob Pelinka has to wear the brunt of this because ultimately, even though LeBron wields a lot of power within that organization, the buck stops with Rob Pelinka. And he's ultimately the one that has to execute the trade. And even though ultimately he catered to LeBron, he's got to wear the brunt of that. Now, I'm not going to absolve LeBron either because Pelinka had a trade for Buddy Hield in place that would have retained a little bit more of their depth. And instead, LeBron wanted to pivot and sign Westbrook. So now he's got to live with the fact that we're dealing with this situation. And now the Lakers are hamstrung. That falls on LeBron as well. But I just think that it was already unrealistic at this point in the year to really be able to execute a major trade like that. So I understand LeBron's camp is frustrated, and it's only been exacerbated by Anthony Davis's injury. That's true. And I understand LeBron's trying to paint Rob Pelinka as like this bad guy. I don't know if it's entirely justified, but both of those guys shouldn't be absolved of blame and of backlash coming back their way. That's the reality of the situation. So I want to transition to the All-Star game. Just very quickly wanted to touch on the All-Star game. And let me say this, Team LeBron beat Team Durant 163 to 160 Team LeBron. LeBron's now 5-0 in this new All-Star format. I love this new All-Star format. And I have to give credit to the NBA, and I've always given them credit for their creativity, their open-mindedness, and kind of their progressive outlook when it comes to trying new things, adopting new tournaments, new styles, new formats. And we saw that not only with the with not only the game, but also the broadcasts. They had two different streams going on, a more traditional broadcast with Kevin Harlan, Reggie Miller, and Dwayne Wade. And then they had kind of this unorthodox color commentary heavy coverage with the Inside the NBA crew. And it was kind of akin to the ESPN Monday Night Football. You had the traditional broadcast and then the Manning cast, two different broadcasts covering the same game, but different styles. And I kind of like that they had that with the NBA. And then obviously this format, I think, is just fantastic because you have not only more incentives for the athletes, because at the end of each quarter, the first three quarters, the team who wins gets to donate $100,000 to a charity of their choice. And then whatever the total score is after the first three quarters, the team that's in front, you add 24 points in honor of Kobe and his 4 All-Star Game MVPs, and that's your target score. It's the Elam ending. I think it's been a great addition, and we've seen the impact that it's had on the game. The stretch that down the stretch of the game is always a lot more competitive. You see the intensity ratchet up. Players actually care, and it's tremendous. And I also thought that given that this All-Star game was being played in Cleveland, it was fitting that the two Ohio guys would show out. Steph Curry being from Akron, obviously LeBron as well. Those two guys left their imprints on the outcome of the game. Steph showed once again why he is universally recognized and unequivocally recognized as the greatest shooter of all time. Made 16 threes in the game, which was an All-Star game record. It's a shame that the All-Star game isn't considered a regular game in the NBA, because the record for the most threes in a regular game is 14, hit by his Warriors teammate Klay Thompson, and Steph Curry hit 16. Not to mention 8 threes in an All-Star game was the record. He hit 9 in the first half, and then he comes out into the third quarter, starting off hitting 5 straight threes. He was absolutely sensational. His shot making is ridiculous. It's absurd. And then to have it bookend with LeBron hitting a ridiculous one-legged turnaround to ice the game and win it for Team LeBron, basically over 2 defenders, Zach LaVine and then Joel Embiid came for a late help. It was just a fitting way for that game to end in LeBron's house, in the King's Palace, for him to be able to shine the brightest in that final moment. Just seemed fitting for a number of reasons. But what I thought was the most special is, again, this was a night where the NBA was recognizing the top 75 greatest NBA players of all time. This is the NBA's 75th anniversary, and it was their 75th All-Star game. And for them to recognize the NBA's greatest 75 players during the halftime celebration and ceremony, it was extremely moving, extremely powerful. And I thought the fact that they singled out every single member of that hallowed group, I thought was extremely touching. They literally singled out every single one of them, divided them up into positions, called them up onto this little ring and this 2-leveled kind of floor, like podium thing. And I thought that it was extremely touching. You could see how heartfelt it was for the players to be mentioned in that class like that. Was extremely special. And it kind of gave me goosebumps, really, just to see all those guys return, no matter what their age was, to see them return and be in person, be there in attendance. There were so many of them in attendance. Obviously, many were not available. Some, unfortunately, passed away. but most of them were able to be there in person. And that was, I think, unique. It was one of the rare instances where you saw that collective star power amongst everyone. And that was really, really special. And that was really, really unique. And I just thought the game was done beautifully. I thought the ceremonies were executed beautifully. They paid respects. It was a great tribute to all of those guys there. And it was just extremely, extremely moving. We're going to step aside for a quick 30-second break. When I come back, Juwan Howard, the Michigan head basketball coach, struck a Wisconsin assistant coach after the game. I'm going to touch on that and a little bit more when we come back. So, welcome back to Morning Joe. So, this was a really eye-popping, shocking end to what was supposed to be just a mundane Sunday in the college basketball landscape. Michigan and Wisconsin, they played a college basketball game at the Kohl Center in Madison, Wisconsin, beat the Badgers 77-63. And in the handshake line at the end of the game, Michigan head coach Juwan Howard actually took a swipe at one of the Wisconsin basketball assistant coaches, Joe Krabenhoff, and he actually connected on the side of his face. Again, this is coming after a meltdown in the second half. Wisconsin pulled away. It was a difficult defeat for the Wolverines, lost 77-63. Apparently, according to Juwan Howard, he was ticked off because Coach Greg Gard called a timeout with about 10 seconds left or so in the game when they were up big. He thought it was a bit gratuitous. He thought it was a little insulting and demeaning to his players. And again, just to add insult to injury, you have this ugly incident that takes place at the end of the game. And apparently, Juwan Howard claimed that Greg Gard and some of the other coaches were kind of touching him and grabbing him. And that made him feel threatened and felt like he needed to defend himself. I don't buy that part at all. I think that his actions were inexcusable. And it wasn't like, if you look at the videotape, it wasn't like Wisconsin's assistant coaches were acting in a truculent or pugnacious manner. They weren't holding up fists. They weren't trying to engage in some altercation. There was a verbal spat. And there was a verbal altercation that was taking place. Clearly, Juwan Howard was frustrated that the Wisconsin Badgers called the timeout. Coach Greg Gard tried to defend himself, tried to explain why he called the timeout. At that point, it was pretty irrelevant what he had to say. It doesn't really matter at that point. Let me just say this, because obviously it's inexcusable. There are certain unwritten rules in sports. There are certain exceptions to certain situations. We've seen this in the NFL. If you're up big and you've got the football, no matter where you are on the field, you take a knee. You run out the clock, you take a knee. In basketball, you dribble out the clock. If you're up, you don't try to score at the end of the game. If you're already up, you just dribble out the clock. Those are some of the unwritten rules. So from a simple yes, no, should Wisconsin have taken the timeout in the situation to advance the ball and to be able to get the offense set to break the press with 10 seconds left? No, they shouldn't have taken it. Could I envision a situation in which Juwan Howard takes this as a personal affront and almost views this as a slight against his team? And should he be a little offended? Yes, to some degree. Yes, I understand that. And I also understand Juwan Howard wanting to defend his team, stand up for his players. I understand that. But to strike a coach because of frustrations over that, and to physically assault someone, those actions are deplorable and they are reprehensible. They shouldn't be tolerated, and that is extremely humiliating and disgusting on the part of Juwan Howard. And he should know better than that. He's a decorated Michigan athlete, multiple time NBA champion. To carry himself in that kind of manner, to allow his emotions to boil over like that is disgusting. And he unfortunately was representing not only himself, but the University of Michigan in that instance too, the brand of Jordan in that instance. So I think that when you look at Juwan Howard and you combine the fact that not only if you look at this incident face value, but you also understand the context, which is that this isn't the first incident involving Juwan Howard since his arrival at Michigan in 2019. He also tried to confront Maryland's head coach Mark Turgeon in the Big Ten tournament last year, and they had to be separated between the two because they got in a heated exchange, and Juwan Howard was trying to approach Mark Turgeon to let him know how he was feeling. So to me, this isn't just about the timeout. You can isolate that one incident, but really on a macro level, this is about these are pent up frustrations that Juwan Howard is having about his entire season, because this whole season for Michigan has been a grave disappointment. This was a team that was ranked number 6 in the preseason. Now they're unranked. They're 14-11, 7th in the Big Ten Conference, 8-7 in Big Ten Conference. They've had some bad losses at UCF versus Minnesota. They only have 2 quality wins versus Purdue at home and perhaps on the road at Iowa. But this is a team that won the Big Ten last year. They were a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament a year ago. They had a top 10 recruiting class in 2021. I believe a top 7 recruiting class or top 10 recruiting class in 2020, top 7 recruiting class in 2021. I think they were 4th in the recruiting class last year. They have another top 10 recruiting class coming in 2022. So there were a lot of expectations on this Michigan Wolverines team this year. That's the reality. And so far, they have been a huge disappointment. They haven't lived up to those expectations. That's the reality. And the shame is that it actually marred and kind of overshadowed what was a really good second half win for the Wisconsin Badgers. That's the shame, is that you brought more attention on an altercation post game versus what actually happened in between the hardwood lines. And that's extremely disappointing to see. And again, because this isn't the first incident involving Juwan Howard, I would say he should probably be suspended a few games. I don't think anything more punitive than that is necessary, but I also think that there has to be a harsh enough penalty to discourage this type of action from happening again. I do think that is necessary. So I'd say you suspend him a few games, maybe 3 to 5 games, because this is his second incident. He doesn't need to be suspended for the Big Ten tournament. He doesn't need to be suspended for potential postseason berth. But this is just very, very disgusting. Very disgusting by him. Hopefully, once he's had some time to calm down and cool off a bit, he'll see the bigger picture and he'll see that his actions weren't justified. But in the meantime, again, did Wisconsin need to take the time out there? No. But to the victor goes the spoils. So you get to choose how you want to end a game. And I just think it was unnecessary on the part of Juwan Howard. Finally, last topic before my Malkin's moments. Just briefly want to touch on the Pittsburgh Steelers. They hired the Miami Dolphins head coach Brian Flores to be their new defensive assistant linebackers coach. Let me first credit the Pittsburgh Steelers because amid all of this controversy and amid this current lawsuit against the NFL and against a couple specific teams in the NFL and some specific people within those organizations, the Pittsburgh Steelers managed to see past all that clutter and shrewdly hire one of the top available guys in the NBA, one of the best defensive minds in the NBA, in the NFL, one of the best defensive minds in the NFL, and Brian Flores. I thought that this was an incredibly intelligent move on their part for a bevy of reasons, but the main one is because of his NFL, his football acumen. I thought the guy did a really good job in Miami. I've talked about this before, given the obstacles that they had to overcome, given the question marks surrounding their quarterback. I thought he was able to navigate that whole situation really well and actually lead them to at least one winning season. Two, I believe, if you look at the last two seasons, they've been winning seasons. And I thought that you look at the job he's done on the defensive side of the ball over the course of his career, it's always been pretty stout. Even in 2020, the Dolphins had a top 7 defense as far as points allowed. He's always been in the top when it comes to points allowed, even when he was an exceptional assistant and defensive coach with the Patriots from 2011 to 2018. The final 4 years of his career with the Patriots, his time with the New England Patriots and Bill Belichick, 2015, top 10 defense. 2016, number 1 in points. 2017, 2018, top 7 in points allowed. Now, granted, I understand he is working alongside and beside Bill Belichick. That's a huge benefit, and Bill Belichick is the main catalyst behind that. But Brian Flores is a heck of a coach, and I just think from a macro level, this kind of move perfectly personifies who the Pittsburgh Steelers are, who they are as an organization, what they represent. Obviously, we know the Rooney Rule. It originated because of Dan Rooney, who's the son of the late original owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Art Rooney. Dan Rooney was the chairman for the committee's league diversity committee. And I just think that, the organization as a whole has always conducted themselves with the utmost professionalism. They've always been a morally just organization, and they have practiced what they preach, what they've always preached. And they have been willing to hire and take chances on minorities, which is what they should be doing. And obviously they did that with Mike Tomlin. And he's been the one black coach in the NFL that has managed to withstand all the shrapnel and debris from all the other black head coaches that have been cut by other organizations. He's managed to stand tall within and through all of that. And you have to give credit to the Steelers for, again, being an organization that doesn't simply make moves to appease to a kind of certain demographic. They make decisions that they think are in the best interest of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mike Tomlin was a great hire. He's been proven to be a great head coach. Brian Flores is a tremendous hire. He has proven to be a great defensive-minded coach. They saw past that. They hired him. And again, I think that the fact that you have the very team that spearheaded and is given credit and is credited for creating this Rooney Rule, to have them be the ones to actually take the actions. And it was Dan Rooney to be the league's diversity committee. He was the chairman of that. I think it speaks volumes. And again, from a personnel standpoint, this is a huge coup for the Steelers, because you already had TJ Watt, who's the reigning defensive player of the year, 22 sacks. You got Joe Hayden, Cameron Hayward, obviously TJ Watt, Devin Bush, Minka Fitzpatrick. You're giving Brian Flores a defense led by TJ Watt and all those other pieces. They're going to be scary. And I think part of the problem was in years past, the offense at times with Big Ben was so anemic that it was really just discouraging and dejecting to the defense. And it took a toll, and that's why they were oftentimes gassed by the time they actually got out onto the field. And now they'll hopefully be rejuvenated with another head coach in Brian Flores, who I think is going to be a great addition for them. Okay, final topic. My Malkins moments. I have some great Malkins moments for you. Several of them are from the NBA's All-Star game that took place last night, but I have to start with Phoenix Suns guard Chris Paul. He received the Kobe and Gigi Bryant WNBA award for the advocacy of girls and women's basketball. He's officially the first recipient of the Kobe and Gigi Bryant WNBA advocacy award, which is given to an athlete that is outwardly promoting women's basketball and the WNBA. And Chris Paul has shown a propensity for doing that. He has attended a lot of WNBA games, regular season, postseason. He, within his own summer camp at the CP3 Basketball Academy, he supports youth girls basketball. So he is in the community trying to give back, trying to teach the game, trying to help promote women's basketball and women's sports. And the WNBA and Vanessa Bryant actually presented Chris Paul with that award at the NBA All-Star game on Sunday night in Cleveland. And the WNBA is also going to be making a donation to the Mamba and Mambacita Sports Foundation, which is Kobe's nonprofit and the Bryant family's nonprofit organization dedicated to helping serve underserved athletes. So it's a major credit accomplishment, and congrats to CP3 for being the first recipient of that. Big congratulations and shout out to Steph Curry, winning the All-Star Game MVP for the first time in his career. Hit 16 threes, shattering a previous record of 8. In fact, he hit 9. He passed the record in the first half. He had 9 threes in the first half, 50 points. It was the second most scored in an All-Star game ever. The most points scored in an All-Star game ever, Anthony Davis in 2017 scored 52 points when he was hosting the All-Star game in New Orleans when he was a member of the Pelicans. But the way that he got those points, it was a lot easier than the way that Steph Curry was able to generate 50, because Davis was getting a bunch of dunks. Steph Curry was 16 of 27 from the three-point line. It is absolutely just laughable how talented this guy is. And again, he already set the NBA record for the most three-pointers made all time during the regular season. Now he's done it in a single game in the All-Star game. And it's special because people also forget he is from Akron. He was born in Ohio. So to do that in his city of birth and in his state of birth is very special. Speaking of guys from the state of Ohio, LeBron James became the third player to tally 100 assists in an NBA All-Star game. Chris Paul has the most with 128. Magic Johnson is second with 127. Now LeBron is in there with at least over 100 right now and counting. Who knows how many more he's going to rack up. The guy is an iron. He's an Iron Man. He continues to defy age with his play. It's amazing. So big shout out to him. Big shout out to the Pittsburgh Penguins' Sidney Crosby from last week, who netted his career 500th goal. He has scored at least 500 goals. He is just the third active player to reach 500 goals, scoring it against the Philadelphia Flyers. I think when you think about the greatest NHL players of all time, obviously Wayne Gretzky is the first that comes to mind, but there's a strong argument to be made that Sidney Crosby is number 2. I'm not saying he's number 2, but I think that what he has done for the sport, how consistent he has been with the Penguins, delivering multiple Stanley Cup champ titles, the guy is phenomenal. He continues to shatter records and shatter the mold, and a big shout out to him. And finally, or actually I have two more. Shout out to Austin Cindric, who won the Daytona 500 for the first NASCAR Cup Series victory in his 8th career start. He outlasted Bubba Watson, Michael Jordan's client and sponsor. So big shout out to him. To win the Daytona 500 is a huge milestone in a NASCAR driver's career. So shout out to him. Finally, shout out to the Oklahoma Sooners softball star Jocelyn Allo, who hit her 95th career home run yesterday in an 8-0 win over Texas State on Sunday. So first of all, she homered in her first at bat. So far, right now, she is tied with the NCAA Division I record for the most home runs hit in a career at 95. And this is just the beginning of the season. So she is now tied with actually former Oklahoma great Lauren Chamberlain on the all-time list. She can pass that in the record, or she could set the record when the Sooners play in the Mary Nutter Collegiate Classic in Palm Springs, California, which starts on Friday. Not to mention last season in 2021, she led the NCAA with 34 home runs, which was a school record in a single season. So major shout out to Jocelyn Allo. Well, that's all the time that I got for today. Thank you so much for joining me right here on Morning Joe every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe, J-O, with Jonah Malkin on YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter at morning_Joe_ or just Jonah-Malkin. Instagram, JMalk97, TikTok, Jonah Malkin. So as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.